What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Tar Heel Illustrated podcast, brought to you by TarHeelIllustrated.com. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner. Joining me, as he always does, it's our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And AJ, man, the transfer portal is just a grind, isn't it? We've had to scrap a couple of podcasts that we've done on, who was already committed to North Carolina. We knew other guys were going to commit. We just didn't know when it was going to happen. So you end up redoing a lot of pods and scrapping a lot of stuff you wanted to run because of commits and other news breaking. So I guess that's a transfer portal for you, though, right? Yeah.
What we've been doing is a lot of themed pods where let's focus on this little area, and then it's great to go. But we can't run 9 pods in one day. Exactly. Yeah, we have to space. So we hope we can hold on to a couple of days and then run it, sort of layer them out, because we got the football portals open right now. Yeah. And for spring practice just ended. It's unbelievable how busy things are right now. It's funny, I hear from people saying, boy, how are you enjoying your off season?
Like, what
the hell are you talking about? There is no
off season. I don't know what that means. No.
Talk to me on off season is May 18th to May 21st, basically. Yeah. So they don't have great shelf life because things change.
Yeah. It's just a fluid situation.
We're going to do one now, and we hope this has shelf life for.
We're going to do one now, get it up as soon as possible, and pray nothing happens in between that time.
And I guarantee you something will happen. And
we'll be doing another podcast here in the next few hours talking about something else.
If people could only, I would say in the last few weeks, we've done maybe 7 or 8 basketball pods that we haven't run.
Yeah, it's something crazy like that. Yeah. 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 That's how it is, man.
I've been doing football. We're going to run a series of football depth chart stuff for each position group. I'm holding off on it because some of that changes. And in fact, Brandon and I did a defensive spring football pod that we haven't run yet. And we talk a little bit about Don Chapman in there. So we're going to have to, I'm not going to redo that podcast.
I'll have to add a note on the bottom.
It's a 40-minute pod. Yeah, we'll have to put a note in there and just say we did it at a time. And we actually talked about him. I know this is a basketball pod here, but we actually talked about him probably not starting, just sort of he's going to have to find his niche there, and that's probably why he left. But again, this is not a football pod, so we'll stay on hoops here.
Yeah, save that for another podcast, which I'm sure we'll be doing soon on football as well. But AJ, we're here to talk about in this one the 3 transfers that Carolina has landed as of right now, that being Paxson Wojcik, Jae'Lyn Withers, and Cormac Ryan in that order. We did a podcast a couple days ago where we talked about Wojcik and Withers and what they brought to the Tar Heels. And again, had to scrap that one because of Ryan's commitment on Thursday evening. I guess we still could have run it, but it would have been like, what about Ryan? Yeah, I thought it was a fantastic pod. Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. So going to be talking about
that doesn't change. Now we just have to add another layer to it.
Yeah, essentially we'll be rehashing a lot of the stuff we've already talked about with the other guys, but obviously breaking down Ryan's game. We did do a podcast on Ryan Thursday night in terms of his commitment. Go watch that if you want to learn more about that one. AJ, I have to say this as well. I wanted 150 likes on that video. We're like 180 already. So big thanks to everybody that did like that video.
I haven't seen yet today. I had a doctor's appointment this morning, and I haven't had a chance to see. So as soon as we finish, then I got to get my hair cut today too. This is TMI big time, but we've been doing this more and more in these pods lately. And it's sort of a little bit of a precursor to something we're going to do starting in May called the Daily Drop.
Yeah.
We're going to be running something. And sometimes it's just going to be whatever. It's going to be a little bit radio show oriented. I did radio for
more
years.
Niche podcasts.
So a little bit niche podcasts, niche stuff, and a little bit conversational. We're actually going to involve you guys too. We're going to do some things where we involve you guys with questions and
I'm looking forward to those Q&A kind of mailbag type pods. I think they're going to be fantastic. Yeah. I think people are going to really, really love those as well. So a lot coming this offseason, AJ. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that.
We're doing a lot of changes with advertisers and all kinds of things. So we got
big offseason for Carolina football and basketball. Big offseason for TarHeelIllustrated.com as well. So just stay tuned.
This is going to be the most. This is going to be the most important off season we've had as a site, because it's never really the off season. You got recruiting everything, but we're doing some personnel changes. Yeah, and we're doing a lot of branding changes. We're adding a lot more stuff. And I've said before, the Facebook page, as soon as Trey Scott rolls up his sleeves and dives into that, you guys are really going to enjoy what we're going to do with the face, because Trey is really good with a lot of those things. So I'm kind of giving him the keys to that page and say, go crazy, young fella.
Yeah,
you got to do.
He'll be fantastic at it. He definitely.
But stay with us, because a lot of the stuff's going to be on the site. It's not just going to be here in the channel. So
no doubt about it.
And remember, for $8.33 a month, you could be a Tar Heel insider too.
Link below.
There you go. I got it.
Link below, guys. Come subscribe to the Twitter as well. Links below. Facebook link is below as well, I think. So go over there and like that page if you haven't already, because a lot of stuff obviously coming this offseason. We're obviously very active on Twitter too. So again, make sure you follow all that stuff. Let's start with Paxson Wojcik. AJ Brown transfer. Obviously has some connections to North Carolina with his dad being assistant in the Matt Doherty era, which a lot of Carolina fans don't really like to talk about or remember. So we'll move on from that one. But just to run through his stats real quick, 14.9, excuse me, if I can talk, points per game for him last year at Brown, 7.2 rebounds, 3.2 assists, shot 46.1% from the floor and 38% from three. So looking at his stat line right there, a guy that can do a little bit of everything for you and does a little bit of everything for you on the court, which I think is vitally important. Can play a little bit of that too. Probably a little bit of that three as well for the Tar Heels, which I think they need. And overall, I think he'll just be a really good rotational option for North Carolina. So AJ, give me your thoughts in how do you think Paxson Wojick fits into next year's team and what kind of impact do you think he can have?
Well, you got me thinking when you said the connection there. Before I go straight Paxson Wojcik, I want to toss this out because I love connecting these dots, right? Because remember I'd said that with the three guys they now have with Cormac Ryan, I'm pretty sure that when he plays a game in Chapel Hill, he'll be the first guy to ever play in the Smith Center for three different college basketball teams because he did for Stanford and for Notre Dame. Also, all three of these guys they brought in, they've already all played games in the Dean Dome.
I know.
Because Brown played there a couple years ago.
You don't see that
it's very unique. And here's the other thing. I'm going to give you another North Carolina connection. I'm percolating right now, man.
I love it, man.
I'm going to give you another North Carolina connection. So Cormac Ryan played for Jared Haas at Stanford for a year. Haas was an assistant under Roy, won some national titles.
Yep.
All right. Paxson Wojcik's dad was assistant at Carolina under Matt Doherty. Paxson was born when his dad was in his first year as assistant, but he wasn't born in Chapel Hill. He was born in Charleston.
Yep.
Okay. And the other thing is JaeLyn Withers is from Charlotte.
Mm-hmm. So
there's a lot of neat little connection stuff here. I enjoy things like that. And I think that kind of makes it. These guys are Carolina guys in a roundabout kind of way in some fashion, and I actually think that's a pretty cool thing. As far as Wojick goes, I've also seen all three of these guys play in the Dean Dome in person too, which is pretty wild stuff. Mm-hmm. Like I'd never seen Manic play before because when I saw Oklahoma, it was a year before he got there.
Pete Nance. I never saw. I've seen Northwestern in basketball in a tournament in Kansas City about 7 years ago. Carolina played them. That was a Luke May outlet pass game. I'll never forget that. He had an outlet pass from the baseline. It was like, wow, I think it was to Justin Jackson for a breakaway. But anyway, I digress. So Paxson Wojcik is a guy I think that fits in really well. And I've used this example and I'm going to use it again. And I'm not shortchanging him at all. I'm just kind of giving people an understanding of why he's there and what he could bring to the program. Joey Calcaterra from UConn is the perfect example. Hurley went ahead and got him from University of San Diego, not San Diego State, but University of San Diego, the Toreros. They play in the West Coast Conference in Gonzaga's league, but they're usually in the bottom half of the league. So they get him as a grad transfer, and he plays 1 year at UConn. And when he came in off the bench, that second wave that they brought in, that group never let up leads. I mean, they were as strong in some ways as the starters because they went a shorter period of time. It was like, your third shift in hockey, you go a short period of time, but you go all out. And they did that a couple of times. And one of the reasons they won the national championship and won all their games by significant margins is because there was great reinforcement when Hurley went to the bench. So I envision Wojick being someone like that, given what they're bringing in and may still bring in from the portal. And I think it's a role he probably has embraced because he probably understood that was going to happen. So when people say, why are they bringing him in? You've got to have reinforcement. The number one beef that a lot of people have had about Hubert is there's no reinforcement off the bench. Well, a guy like him provides you some of that. They're going to be deeper next year because he knows Wojick can play. He's played against Wojick. He had a pretty good game in the Dean Dome a few years ago. Blew by Caleb Love a lot that night. There's photos of that, which we actually have that Kevin Roy took, which is fascinating stuff when you go back and look at him, because who knew, right? Yeah, you never know what's going to happen to college basketball. So he's a guy that can shoot from the perimeter. He's a willing passer.
He had a lot of games where he had 4 assists or more at Brown. He's a rebounder. He's a tough kid. He had 13 rebounds at Michigan State. I think he had 5 double-figure rebound games, and we're talking about a 6'5" guy. And don't give me the Ivy League crap, because Princeton showed that the Ivy League's pretty good. Paxson played well against Princeton. Mm-hmm. They beat Princeton this year. Brown did, and he played well against them, and he played really well at Michigan State, which is a very good team. Michigan State is a club that Tom Izzo's favorite drill is probably when he rolls the ball out there. There's no baskets, and they basically wrestle for the ball. I mean, they still do stuff like that there. Yeah. So when you get 13 rebounds against a team whose coach lights them on fire when they don't get rebounds, that's pretty impressive. That tells me something. So when you look at the whole of his game, I think he's a guy that he's a connected player. I think he can connect in a lot of different situations, whether you're going big, whether you're going small, if you're going to run set plays, if you're going to run motion, if you're going to pick up tempo and trap and try to get easy baskets. I think Wojcik fits in and all that stuff. Mm. He's athletic. He's not super bouncy, but he's got a really quick first step, and he's quick with the ball. He's quick with the dribble. Some guys are not quick with the dribble because there's a little bit of thinking that goes on that slows them down. There's some indecisiveness. He's a very decisive player when he's on the handle. So he's going to add a lot, and he's going to be someone that has to be guarded because he can hurt you if he's not guarded. So when you're bringing someone like that off the bench, and I'm assuming that he comes off the bench, I think that's the kind of reinforcement really good teams need to have. And I will submit as Exhibit A for the 50th time, Joey California at UConn as an example. Yeah, he's a little bit longer than Wojcik, but there's some similarities in the kind of player he is.
Yeah, and one thing I think too, an intangible that maybe doesn't show up on the stat sheet. So a lot of people aren't going to know this, but I listened to a interview with his coach at Brown, and just so people know, he also played at Loyola. I don't know if it was for the first two years.
First 2 years, he played at Loyola. He played for Porter Moser. He was in that period where he was on a team that advanced pretty far in the tournament as well. Mm-hmm. So it was. I'm trying to think. It was Roy's last year.
I believe you're right.
I think Loyola got into the second weekend of the tournament.
Sister Jean, right? Not making
Sister Jean. Well, they went to the Final Four in 2018, I believe it was. And so they had some really good teams there for a while. So he was recruited into a program that was coming off the Final Four, and he was on very winning teams, and Moser ended up going to Oklahoma. So he's been in a winning environment before, and they were actually competitive at Brown.
Yeah.
They had a winning record.
Yeah. What wasn't it?
And they made I know this may sound like a small thing to somebody, but they did make the Ivy League postseason. They have a little playoff they do. They're not a full. It's kind of an odd way they go about it there, but they were relevant in the Ivy League, and there's a little bit of a winning culture. They're not Princeton, they're not what Penn once was.
No, but
they're not what Yale has become. Yeah. They're not what Harvard's been under Tommy Amaker, but they're still pretty representative. And they almost beat Carolina a year and a half ago in the defense.
Paxson had a really good showing in that game as well.
If it wasn't for RJ Davis getting hot late, I don't think Carolina wins that game.
I think you're absolutely right. I do remember that game, and again, Wojcik did have a good night against them. But back to the point I was making, I listened to an interview with his coach at Brown, and the biggest thing that he talked about with Wojcik is, again, things that don't come up on the stat sheet. And you look at his stats and they're impressive. I mean, and again, I know it's Brown. People are like, well, he did that at Brown. What's he going to do? Again, for where he was at, what he was doing and being asked to do, you look at his stat line, it's good. You'd take that at Brown any day of the week from a guy like him.
Ball player.
But he talked about the leadership, and not only the leadership that he brings, but just the almost positive vibes that he brings. He's a great guy that you want in your locker room. He's a motivator. I think he's got a little bit of a FU about him too, where he's kind of leads in that way too, if you know what I'm saying, a little fanny smacker, as we like to call him. I think he's got a little bit of that in him, but I think the intangibles and things that he brings to that locker room that are so important, AJ. And I think people in the transfer portal, especially Carolina fans, because I've interacted with them a lot on Twitter, they look at stat lines and they look at where they come from. And more importantly, a lot of people just say, well, he was like a 3-star in high school. Why are we going after him? And I think people need to understand how the landscape of college basketball has changed. We could sit on here and do multiple podcasts, AJ, where we just looked at guys all across the country that have come in from different programs and gone to different programs, smaller teams, gone to bigger leagues, gone to bigger programs, and had really positive seasons and really positive impacts on teams. I mean, it's countless examples. Yep. So I think some people are underwhelmed with him. And again, I don't expect him to come in and be a starter. I don't think you want him to be starting on this North Carolina team, but in terms of a reserve guard that can do a little bit of everything for you and is a positive guy to have in the locker room, a little bit of a leader in there, and just a guy that people are going to love to be around. That to me is the exact kind of player you want to bring in terms of a role guy, a guy that's going to come in and just be a good rotational option for you. I think he fits that well. Yeah. And overall, I think he's a good pickup for North Carolina.
I love using the term fanny smacker. Do you remember when I asked Hubert if he had any fanny smackers last season? Not this past one, but his first year. And the way he looked at me was like I had horns growing out of my head or something like that. But I agree with you. And I also think that, to your point, imagine what the diehard Kansas State fans thought when they got a 5'7" guard from Arkansas Little Rock.
Yeah.
It turned out to be one of the most electrifying players in college basketball. How do you think Miami fans thought when they brought in a 6'7" center from Arkansas State named Norchad Omier? So I could go on and on and on about these kinds of guys. I don't think Wojcik's going to be what those two players were, but I think more like the example I gave you from UConn, and that's what you want. Carolina fans have been, moaning about not using the bench. I don't think you bring in Paxson Wojcik to not play him. I think he's going to play. He's going to be reinforcement off the bench, and he does deliver some of that juice that you're talking about. I think Cormac Ryan delivers more of it because he's a more prominent player and he's going to play more minutes.
Agreed.
So, but I do think that when you have guys in there that go hard all the time, they make the other guys look bad. It's the Rudy line. If you remember the movie Rudy, during the spring practice, one of the starters goes over to him and says, "Why don't you dial it back some? You're
making us look bad." Yeah.
You want those dudes. Coaches want those guys, because if they're going all out and they're not getting on the court as much as the starters, they're going to make them look bad. And I think that you can significantly enhance your culture with guys like that.
Yeah, I think it's huge. I do. I think it's huge. We've seen examples where maybe chemistry wasn't great on Carolina teams, or maybe there wasn't enough guys. The on-court
chemistry wasn't last year.
Yeah.
I said it during the year when everybody was thinking it was the other stuff. It was the on-court chemistry. They had a lot of dysfunction on the floor last year.
Very dysfunctional.
And we're seeing Hubert address that dysfunction in the manner he's going into the portal. And a guy like Wojcik, like I said at the outset with Wojcik, he can work his way into whatever approach you want to play in a basketball sense. He can work his way into that and be a comfort in that approach and not be an irritant. Irritant maybe isn't the right word. They had guys that just kind of got in the way at times last year. And right now, what they're bringing in are guys that don't get in the way. They can be productive without getting in the way. And I think that that's the shift we're seeing Hubert make. And I think it's fascinating. And it reflects the self-evaluation that I talked about when they didn't make the tournament. And I said, hey, they can use this to their advantage. They can make something out of this. And I think right now we've seen Hubert Davis and his staff do that.
Yeah, I think all three of these guys bring a little bit something different to the table, which we'll talk about here in a second with Withers. But real quickly, AJ, let me give a shout out to our sponsor on this podcast, myfavoritefranchise.net. We're talking about them a little bit later on too, so stay tuned for that. But guys, I can put it as simply as this. If you've been thinking about switching your career, if you've been thinking about maybe getting a little bit of a side hustle to bring in a little more income, heck, maybe you're fresh out of school, just quit your job and you're looking for something to do where you can be your own boss, control your income and schedule, all that jazz. You can do that with myperfectfranchise.net. So many different franchises you can open. Andy, what is he in? Dumpsters and Porta Johns right now, right? Yeah. I mean, you're talking about things that I guarantee you 99% of us, when we think franchises, we don't think that automatically. We think Chick-fil-A or, a gas station, something like that. We don't think things like that. And there's so many different types of franchises, AJ. It's insane.
When you look at a dumpster, you don't think, hey, somebody's independently wealthy because of that thing.
Yeah, nah, man. You really don't.
We know someone who is.
Yeah.
And he wants to help you guys do that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So, guys, talk to Andy if you're interested. Again, we'll mention him a little bit later and give you all a little more info on him. But he can help you change your career path, open your own franchise, walks through the whole consultation process with you. And most importantly, AJ, I think this is the most lucrative thing about him. He doesn't make a penny unless you make a penny. Okay. Yeah. So he's not, it's a win-win situation for everybody. If you just decide, man, it's not for me, you're not losing any money by doing that. So check him out, myperfectfranchise.net. Talk to Andy. Been a Rival subscriber for over 22 years, massive Mac Brown fan as well. So just a really relatable guy, just all around good guy as well. So Link below to his website. Check the podcast we did with him as well. Big shout out to MyPerfectFranchise.net.
If you want to get him on your real good side, ask him, say, hey, I want to talk about that Vince Young run that got you guys a title.
Does he have a Vince? He's got a Vince Young jersey or something like that hanging
office,
in his, yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, we've done those Zooms with him. He's got it right. Actually, I did 2 Zooms with him back in the late fall, early winter, about one's a shorter one, sort of a snapshot of what he does. One's a longer one. If you look in the video, you can see the Vince Young jersey.
Go check those podcasts out again, because you'll get a lot more information out of that.
See, he and Mac have something in common. That's their favorite quarterback run of all time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's for sure. So, again, massive Texas fan.
Got him a title.
Yeah, heck yeah, man. Yeah, I think Carolina fans would bite your arm off for one of those. Let's keep it moving. Talk about Jae'Lyn Withers now, Louisville transfer, second guy to commit out of these 3, average 8.9 points, 5.3 rebounds, shot 43.3% from the floor, 41.7% from 3. I think those, especially that 3-point stat line for a 4 is really impressive on a Louisville team that really struggled last year. I think you said it in the last podcast that we did on Wojcik and Withers, which never saw the light of day, and hence why we're redoing it right now, that when Louisville played well, and I know they didn't win a lot of games, when they played well and they won games, he played well, and he was a positive contributor on the wins that they did have. There was a correlation there. I really like his game, AJ. And his game actually might have surprised me the most out of watching tape on all 3 of these guys, because for a guy that's 6'9", don't know if he's actually 6'9". I know they always kind of bump it up a little bit. Doesn't really quite look 6'9" to me, but we'll say he's 6'9". He's probably 6'8", for being honest. Yeah. But his comfortability off the dribble, creating his own shot, was super impressive, because he kind of plays like a guy you wouldn't assume to be a 4. He really is kind of that modern day stretch 4, but he's also a really good spot up shooter from the outside. The amount of corner threes I saw him hit, catch and shoot against in his Louisville tape was really, really impressive. And he's also got a fluid jump shot, AJ. Yeah. You see some of these guys step out at the stretch 4 position. It doesn't really look natural. It doesn't really look like a pretty shot, but I think he has that. He has a kind of a smoothness to his game that I think is really appealing. And some Carolina fans, interactions on Twitter, have kind of don't think he's going to start, and they kind of consider him a rotational option. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think he slides into that 4 position for North Carolina. That's my opinion. I think you'll probably agree with that too. But talk to me a little bit about Withers' game and what kind of attributes he brings to next year's team. Because again, I think he's got a really nice game, like I said, that impressed me maybe more than I thought it would.
I think we've done 3 pods where he's one of the focuses that we've scrapped. So I feel like Yogi Berra. This is deja vu all over again, talking about Jae'Lyn Withers.
It feels like it, yeah.
Hopefully we run this.
Hopefully this sees the light of day. I'm praying it does.
Yeah, I agree with you. He's got sort of a 3 game, a game of a 3.
Yeah, it's a good way to describe it.
4. Mm-hmm. And I had said all along at the outset, I said they need a long 3 that can play 4. And I think that's what he is. And I think if they had to play him at 3, he could probably handle some stuff at 3. He's athletic enough. I think he can defend. He's got great length. He's got super long wingspan. He doesn't have great first step quickness, but he's got good first step quickness. He's not a darter, if you will, but he gets the job done. I said in a pod that we did, I think after Cormac Ryan committed, I said he doesn't have A+ athletic ability. He's got maybe A- athletic ability, but he's an A+ finisher around the rim, because that's one thing he does. The most impressive thing about his tape to me was finishing at the rim, which is something this team has not done very well at all in a while. Certainly last year, they were 53% in their layups, which is pitiful.
Yeah.
So it wasn't because a lot of them were contested. It wasn't just because Armando missed a lot of layups. They just didn't finish. I mean, how many times do you remember guys finishing in the half court at the rim? Mm-hmm. Not many. This guy does it. He could finish at the rim in a half court set. And that's something they've lacked for a while. So he brings that to him. I've said before, he's a really good weak side player. He's a guy that can cut, run baseline. He could get out weak side rebounds and put them back. He's good in the open court and transition. He's a good lane filler. And he's got a 3, and it's not just the corner. He's comfortable shooting a catch and shoot 3 from the top of the key. He's the kind of guy that maybe he sets the screen and he pops off and just he's there. you flip it back to him, and from 23 feet, he's got a comfortable release and he can knock that thing down. So I don't think he's a guy that's going to step in and take a ton of shots. I don't think that's his game. I think that when he scores, when he has his higher scoring games, it's all about efficiency. It's not about volume shooter, like we've seen from some guys in the past. So again, with these three guys they brought in, they don't have to be ball dominant to produce.
Yeah.
They can be a part of what you're doing and find ways to produce because they're all good cutters. They all have great vision. They see the floor well. They're at their best when they're playing as one of five. When some guys maybe feel like they're at their best playing as one of one. And the other four have to figure out a way to mesh around them. So we saw we can see the evaluation that the staff did by who they go after. And I think Withers is a perfect example of that. And I agree with you. I think he does start. And since we don't know of any significant interaction with any true backup fives, it's telling me that they see Jae'Lyn Washington as a backup five and a backup four, which he can get a lot of minutes doing that. Because I don't know if Withers is a 35-minute guy. I think Withers is probably a 26 to 28-minute guy.
Yeah, you need depth.
And Jae'Lyn gets some of those minutes, and Jae'Lyn gets some of the minutes behind Armando. I think he loves the idea of having a five that could pop out and have everybody out.
Zayden High as well. I know he's a little work in progress, but still.
He is. And he didn't have the greatest senior season, but he's also in a different situation than a lot of guys are in because where he played this year. But I do think Hubert maybe views him as someone that can do a little backup at the five and see what he can do at the four. So it was specifically to Jae'Lyn Withers. Another thing I think people need to disregard is the record of Louisville last year. When they won, like their two conference wins, go look at what he did. Mm-hmm. He played well. So he was in a situation with no point guard. L. Ellis, your high volume shooter, was your point guard. Mm-hmm. So, a buddy of mine growing up used to joke that we'd play pickup basketball, and when he was on the ball at the top, and he put up the number one finger, we knew what that meant. It meant that he's going to take it and shoot no matter what.
You always play pickup with a couple of guys who just don't pass.
So he's going to shoot the ball. He can have 14 people on him. You can bring the whole neighborhood and have him guard him. He's still going to shoot the ball.
I hate playing.
And no disrespect to L. Ellis, but L. Ellis was like that a lot of the time.
Yeah.
I sat there on the baseline when Carolina played up there, and I marveled at some of the shots he took. Not so much that, boy, that's impressive, but like, what the heck? There's three guys open.
Yeah,
Jae'Lyn was a product of that to some degree. It affected him. It's one of the reasons why they stunk. So they also had bad composition. They had bad direction.
It program's a little bit of a mess.
He played hard.
Yeah.
Well, they're trying to figure it out there,
and they have been for a couple seasons now.
But they were a mess last season. There's no doubt about it. But I thought that Jae'Lyn was a solid player all along. When he was at his worst, he was still a solid player. Mm-hmm. And when he was at his best, I thought he was very, very good and absolutely an asset. And I think he plays off of Armando. That's the four you want on the floor when Armando's out there. Jae'Lyn's guy isn't going to drop off and double Armando.
No, he's going to stretch the floor. Yeah,
not going to happen that much. So I'm interested in seeing how he's used, and if what we think the vision of the program is right now moving forward, then I think he's going to be a really fun guy to watch. And people might be sitting here next February saying, "Boy, we really undervalued that guy."
Yeah,
I think he's the one. I think he's the one of the three that could turn out a lot better than people are suggesting right now.
I agree. I was going to say something along the lines of that as well, but you took the words out of my mouth. I completely agree with that. Let's move on to Cormac Ryan, latest guy as of right now. I'm sure somebody else will commit right after we get off this podcast, but
you notice I've checked my phone like for every time.
I've got mine over here.
Oh my gosh, what is that?
Anytime I get a notification, I'm like, oh, this could be bad. Cormac Ryan, Notre Dame transfer, latest guy to commit to North Carolina. AJ, I really like his game too. And I was watching some highlight tape of him and just watching some film on him, and fantastic guy coming off screens. I mean, just whether it's catch and shooting, whether it's taking it off a screen, driving to a little mid-range pull-up, he's got that in his locker. Heck, there's even highlights of him taking the ball up court, taking a guy off the dribble and creating his own shot. And again, looking at his stat line last year, 12.3 points, 4 boards, 2.5 assists last season, shot 34% from three, 40.9% from the floor on a Notre Dame team that struggled. So make no mistakes about it. Notre Dame team that struggled. But I think if you look at his stats the year before, AJ, it's even more interesting because looking at his shooting stats from the 21-22 season, which would good Notre Dame team beat Alabama in the NCAA tournament, he shot 45.4% from the floor and 40.7% from three. So those numbers did go up. And if you can get the similar stat range to what he did at Notre Dame, not this past year on a bad Notre Dame team, but on a year before when Notre Dame had a pretty solid unit, Carolina fans are going to be loving what he can bring to next year's team. And AJ, last thing I'll say about him, I love his game. I love what he does on the court. But an intangible, again, that's not going to show up on the stat sheet that he brings is he is another fanny smacker. He is another FU guy. Just go watch some of his highlights, AJ. He when he's feeling it,
screw you guy.
Screw you guy, whatever you want to call it. At least I'm not on here.
Right? In a press room, I call him the FU guy, but with the whole word. But on this podcast, but I need
to get a little beep sound effect and just throw that.
And a screw you guy, just to sidebar very quickly. A screw you guy is the kind of guy that's out there that can smack fannies that you're talking about, but also you need a guy that pisses off the other team.
And I think he has that. I think he
frustrates the crap out of him. And I do think that he's got a little bit of that edge. I believe we saw an incident in Deendam this year. Yeah. So he's a guy that doesn't back. Well, he's a New York guy. He's a New York City guy. So
yeah, he's got some of that little edge, a little bit of that it to him. Yeah. So I think he really, really fits a need for North Carolina at that two position. I think he can play a little bit of three as well, but he's a scoring guard. He's a guy that can hit outside shots. He can create his own shot a little bit as well. And I think out of the three guys here so far that Carolina's landed, I think to me, he probably makes the biggest impact on next year's team, that just as of right now on paper. And even more importantly with him and Withers, and this is something I talked about in Ryan's commitment podcast that I think people are overlooking a little bit. They're proven ACC guys. And to me, that I can't stress how important that is. Because I think, again, you can go to different parts of the country, different leagues, mid-majors, higher conference, whatever you want to go, and you can bring in players that can impact your team. But there is a little bit of a different expectation in North Carolina. There's a different transition to playing at North Carolina. And I think bringing in guys that have, played against North Carolina for a few different years, but also have played in the league that Carolina is obviously going to be playing in, played against some of these other opponents, scouted these other teams that they'll be playing and other coaches. That, to me, makes the transition just a little bit easier. And I think that's important when you're going to a big time program like North Carolina. The easier the transition can be, the better chance you have is succeeding next year at North Carolina. So talk to me about what Ryan brings to this team, because again, I think he just fits a need this team has. And I really think he's a solid pickup for the Tar Heels.
Well, to the point you just made, it's a lot less likely that the staff misses on those kind of guys because they know them well.
Yeah, they've scouted them and played against them. Yeah,
they missed on Nance because they didn't know anything about him. I mean, some of the players told me that they didn't know they'd never heard of him until Pete Nance is showing up to take a visit.
Yeah, there
was some chatter about him for a while at the NBA camp and stuff, the combine, but they didn't know who watches Northwestern. College kids aren't watching Northwestern. Only junkies like me watch Northwestern. So I think that's a big thing. They missed on him. They missed on Garcia in the sense that they didn't really know what he was about. And one of the guys that vouched for him took off after that season anyway. So I think that knowing what you're bringing in, to me, knowing the weaknesses is more important than knowing the strengths, because the weaknesses are where you get surprised. The strengths are, if you get surprised because of a strength, that's a great thing. If you get surprised because of weakness, you have to adjust. You have to figure out a way to work around it. And it could lead to a lot of negativity. So they know the weaknesses that Wither has. They absolutely know Ryan's because they have fully scouted him a lot. And when you scouted Louisville, you didn't have to spend as much time on JaeLyn Withers as you did on Cormac Ryan when you scouted Notre Dame. Because a lot of the time, Ryan was their engine. Mm-hmm. Now, Leszewski was at times as well, but when Leszewski and Ryan played well, they won.
Yeah.
I mean, they beat Michigan State by 18 points. Mm-hmm. And Ryan went for 23 that game. He was huge that game. So when you look at his best games in college, 29 against Alabama in the NCAA tournament last year, 28 in Cameron Indoor Stadium, and then the 23-point game to beat Michigan State. So that's pretty good company right there.
Absolutely.
And he's done very well against those teams. So he's had a couple 14 games against Carolina. Nice player. Everything you said is accurate. One of the things I really like about him, you talked about him coming off screens. He is really good. I know this is a little inside baseball stuff here, but he's really good at coming off screens. He uses screens well. There is an art to rubbing your guy off a screen.
Yeah.
Because if you rub your guy off a screen the right way, he either has to go around it or he's going to go through it in a way where there's a foul or he just gets clogged up and you're a catch and shoot wide open jump shot. So there are certain aspects to basketball that you're not going to find on message boards. You're not going to find on Facebook pages or even talk shows, but stuff like that, he does really, really, really well. And again, it's the little things that were lacking on last year's team. And of course, everything else we've talked about, space in the floor, hitting those shots, cutting, cohesion, being able to morph into freelance when the sets break down. That last year's team was terrible at that. And they were admittedly terrible at that. I had conversations with RJ Davis about how they struggled when the sets broke down, and sometimes they'd go through one or two options and it would break down and they were lost. That's when you saw dribble, fading 23-footer.
Yeah.
That's when you saw that kind of stuff. But when you have guys like Ryan and you have guys like Wojcik and you have guys like Withers out there, you're less likely to have those kinds of shots simply because that they will morph into something cohesive when the sets break down. And if history's any indication, they're still going to run a lot of sets next year. I would like to see them run a lot of motion because freelance motion is what Roy ran. I think that's what most coaches should run, especially if you have an older team and you have guys that know how to play off each other and you have guys that can stretch the floor. You should play that. And that's what they're going to have next year. And a guy like Cormac Ryan fits in perfectly like that. He's good.
He's a good player.
Court well, he gets to the rim. He's got a phenomenal 2-3 dribble pull-up jumper around the free throw line. He's got a very quick release. It's not Brady Manic quick, but it's quick. And he could shoot from any spot on the floor. And he's not a guy that has to shoot a ton. If you look at some of his games, there are games he shot 5 times. And he didn't score a lot, but he was doing other stuff. And I also don't think that they handled well when he was guarded well, because they didn't get the kind of production from some other guys they thought they were going to get. Leshevsky didn't play as well as they thought. Goodwin didn't play as well as they thought. Starling was a nice player, but he was a freshman. They had point guard issues. Ryan had to play a lot of that. I think he's better off the ball than on the ball. He's good when he has the ball in his hand from the 2 spot, more so than he is from the 1 spot. I don't see him with RJ and Simi Wilcher. I don't see a scenario where Ryan is on the ball at the top much unless it's a last-second shot situation. I could see him being on the ball in a situation like that.
Yeah, I think 2 more things that he brings, too, that we haven't really talked about with either of these guys, and I think Wojcik brings this as well. One aspect of this, just as he's played a lot of college basketball, is I think, and Withers to an extent, too, he just hasn't been around as long as these guys, especially not Ryan, will be a 6th year at North Carolina, but a high basketball IQ, I think Ryan brings. He's been around the block. AJ, this is crazy. I found a picture and I put it in, and we talked about it on the Commitment podcast. I put a picture in when he played against Kenny Williams. Was Cam Johnson still on that team when he was at Stanford?
That was November 12th. 2018, he scored 14 points in the
true freshman at Stanford. Before transferring the next year to Notre Dame and sitting out. So he's a guy that's been around the block and he's an experienced player. So that basketball IQ he brings. And again, we haven't talked about this with really any of these guys. I think all 3 of these guys can do nice things on the defensive end, but I think Ryan is a very, very active defender. And I think he's a good defensive player. And I think that's something. An agitator. And I think, again, AJ, I think that's something Carolina lacked last year. I mean, Carolina was
Withers too.
They were a solid defensive team at times, but I just didn't see a lot of maybe
they were better than people getting
the right word. But I didn't really see a lot of guys on defense last year that maybe have the little bit of an edge that Ryan brings.
Yeah, occasionally they had swells of block shots, but they didn't have a lot of possession changers on defense. Leaky was phenomenal.
Yeah, for sure.
And Leaky would change possessions in a way that kind of went unnoticed because it didn't have to do with the ball. It was keeping his guy from the thing he did better than anybody I've seen at Carolina, maybe since I've been covering them, is kept guys from getting the ball. A lot of people think defense is what you do once a guy gets the ball. Leakey was incredible at not letting this guy get the ball. He can't score if he doesn't get the ball. I remember Buddy Boeheim a couple years ago had 18 in the first half, had 5 touches in the second half, took 2 shots. Mm-hmm. So Leakey did that against Hunter Tyson last year. Did they have anybody that could do that? I think maybe not in the mold of Leakey, but I really think Withers can be a really good help side defender. I think Withers could be pretty solid guarding out away from the basket if he has to. But the help side defense thing, I think, is important too, because they how many times can people remember dudes driving down the lane scoring? And you need help side defense to impede some of that stuff. So I think Withers can give them that. And I really like the agitator approach that Cormac Ryan has. He's one of those guys that, like, come on, man, get off me.
Kind of like a gnat. Yeah. Like, get off me, man. Like, it just annoys you a little bit. Yeah.
He's tough. He's, you think of those defensive slide drills. Think of the movie Hoosiers, and they're doing defensive slide drills. And I know when I played high school basketball in the DC area, and I hated the defensive slide drills. And we go to camp, we do defensive slide drills. Why do we have to do? But it works itself into a game. And when you watch Ryan play defense, I think of those defensive slide drills.
Oh yeah,
gotta keep your rear end down. Got to keep, back in the day they say palms up. I don't think they so much say that as much anymore. But it just looks like a drill. Now he's going to get beat. It's like a lot of other guys. He's not Leakey. He's not Theo, but he's pretty solid. I think that there's a consistency with how he defends that might be an upgrade over what Carolina had before. Caleb could be really good defensively at times, but wasn't very consistent with it, depending on how dialed he in, and he was. And Caleb too often let a series of missed shots affect him on the other end of the floor. Mm-hmm. I don't know Ryan's game as well as I know Caleb's, but I can tell you that I doubt, with everything Mike Bray said about him and what I've seen, that he's the kind of guy that allows a series of misses on one end affect how he defends on the other. Yeah. And that's a good thing, because, the guy, how many times did we hear the players last year say, well, we're better defensively when we score because that lifts us up. Well, you should be even better when you don't score, because that's how you win a game. Mm-hmm. I think Ryan and Withers, especially given the fact that they were on teams that combined for 5 ACC wins last year, I think that they understand that you got to defend even if things aren't going great. So if there's anything that they know that they could do, it's that, because they did keep defending. They did keep plugging along on teams that were not winning games and weren't putting the ball in the basket a whole lot. So I like the fact that they bring that to the table as well for Carolina. Yeah,
and those are things that don't show up on the stat sheet necessarily. And that's a lot of times just what people go automatically to is, oh, we landed this guy, let me go look at his stats. And no, you got to go watch tape. You got to go not just watch their highlights, just go watch some condensed games and see what they're doing maybe when they're not at their best too, because highlights can be a little deceiving as well. So I think that's something you have to dive into.
Find a game where Ryan had 4 points, or a game
and
where
see what else does he bring when he's off.
Find a game where Wojcik had 6 points against Columbia or something like that, and look at the weaknesses, but look at how they still played. That's what I do. Now, I did watch the Alabama game.
Yeah, that's been circulating around Twitter for.
That's like the huddle videos with high school kids. Carolina will offer a kid in football and go look at the thread. Boy, that's an impressive video. We got to get that guy.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that my huddle video in high school could have been at least 20 seconds long with some decent plays. I did knock a guy from Edison on his derriere.
Oh man, I wish they had video and huddle around when you were playing.
If I had that video, I'd be watching it every day and feeling like a king. There's no doubt about it. Look,
tweeting it out. You see, tweeting it out.
Honey, remember when I knocked the guy from Falls Church? Remember when I drove his ass into the ground? Pardon me, his butt into the ground. My wife would have divorced me a long time ago if we had that video. She said, "I'm tired of it. I've seen it enough.
I don't need to see that no more."
I've seen that finger roll in the open court against Benedictine way too many times.
So AJ, that was 30 years ago, man. Let it go. No, I hear that.
I know.
I hear that.
I know. I bring it up for fun. It's sort of mocking the whole thing. Really.
No doubt about it. It's definitely for fun. Last thing we're gonna have in a second. I want to ask you this, and I didn't tell you I was gonna ask you this, but I mean, I think you'll be fine handling this question. When you look at the 3 commits North Carolina has right now in the transfer portal, I'm gonna ask you, below average, good, or great, how would you rank what Carolina's done in the portal so far?
That's a good question, because I don't know if I can answer it exactly that way. I'll try, and it might take me a couple words to get there. But I think what they've done is they've shown us again, okay, we identified all the things that just weren't working. And we have addressed that. I think that's what the staff is saying with what we've seen so far. They also are trying to build a team that fits around RJ and Armando. So let's say they had a totally different five. They might not have gone this route, but Armando was damn good offensively last year through the NC State game. He was averaging 18.5 points a game. He was shooting 62% from the floor. That spin move. Everybody thinks about the end of the year saying, boy, Armando didn't improve at all. Oh, he improved a ton.
Yeah, no doubt.
Drop step and the spin move, the 2-3 dribble, that little shovel shot, little Hansbrough-esque
Just a lot more fluid,
jump hook, more fluid. There's more to his game. His offensive moves were starting from 12 and 14 feet on the baseline instead of just on the lower block. But when teams did two things, they started doubling him, and they knew exactly what Carolina was going to run. Again, which players have told me multiple times, the other teams knew exactly what they were going to run, so they were able to cheat. I don't say cheat meaning going against the rules. They were able to cheat defensively because they knew what was coming.
Yeah.
And they blew it up, and then they didn't handle offensive possessions well when things blew up, when they weren't in their set mode, when the sets no longer were there. So I think what they've done is they've gone out and gotten guys that can handle that. They've gone out and gotten guys that will allow Armando to be in one-on-one situations again. And he can be dominant when he's in those situations. You know, all those layups he missed last year, so many of them were when he's trying to score over two guys. And he's got people giving him, if you go back and look defensively, you got length and you got body. You got a length guy and you got a body guy getting in the way of Armando's shots. And very few people can play through that. And he didn't play through it very well a lot of the time because it's very difficult to do that. But now with everything sort of spread out and the fact that you must honor, like if you have a lineup of RJ, Wojcik, Ryan, Withers, and Bacot, you have to defend all five guys, and you have to defend them where they are. So I think that makes Carolina a better team offensively. I think it makes them more efficient offensively. And as far as defensively goes, the more you score, when you score at a higher rate and a more efficiency, and you have more average a higher point per possession, that puts pressure on the other team to score. So that helps you defensively when you score. And there's nothing wrong with giving up 70 points if you score 80. Nothing wrong with giving up 75 points if you score 87. It's a win. That's ultimately what matters. So I think that probably I would say, what were the options again? I would
below
say
average, good, or great.
Well, I think in between good and great. I would never call this great because we got to see him play.
Yeah.
I think that they've done very well in addressing their needs and formulating something that they envision they want for next season. And they're still going to add to that.
Yeah, I was about to say, they're not done yet either.
They're not done yet. So, and I think that you look for someone in a similar mold. I think that maybe someone that they believe is an absolute 3 is probably what they would get, because they still don't have the absolute 3, and you need a good 3. I've said 1,000 times before, the best teams Roy Williams coached at Carolina
had really good
NBA
threes,
had guys that were NBA 3s.
Yeah.
And I call McCants a 3, even though Manuel was out there, because he used a 3 a lot. And he played sort of the role of a 3 and scored like a 3. So you got to have that. So I think that's what they're looking for now, and someone they believe could be that guy. And they've told him that you can be this guy. Look how you fit with this group out here. The 3 that we have in aren't going to affect you as far as whatever your playing time needs to be. So that's what they're looking for. And I think they're going to roll with that. And there's going to be a different look and a different approach. That is what I'm projecting based on what we've seen so far. So I would say in between good and great, with the potential to inch up a little bit more, but we got to see them play together.
Yeah, it's hard to say great when you've never seen these 3 guys play in a North Carolina uniform. Again, it's jumping the gun a little bit. I do agree. I think
they need to get these guys in. They need to get their 4th portal guy in. So the basketball team's already working out.
Yeah. The sooner the better, man. The sooner the better.
If they can get these guys here in 3 weeks, do it.
I think if they bring in another guy, and we know the names that are being thrown out, I think if any of those guys come, it could. I would never say it's a great transfer window again, because it's hard to say that when you never seen them play in a Carolina uniform. But I would say it can go from good, like you said, to really good, at least on paper, if they can bring in maybe another guy.
I think I think so far they've improved from what they lost.
Yes, no doubt. And
they've brought 3 guys in so far, and last year they combined for 160 made 3-pointers. Everybody they lost combined had fewer than that.
Yeah,
and that's including Caleb Love, who shot a ton of them. He made a lot of them, but he shot a ton. So again, we know where Hubert's going with this. It's not
we're not sitting here like, what is he trying to do? Like, he's bringing in this guy and this guy. They're all different. No, you can see based on who's left, based on who's coming in, you can see kind of an idea of what they're trying to do. And it makes sense, which I think is important. And again, if they can bring in one more guy, which we expect them to, with the names being tossed around, I think it could be a really good, off season for North Carolina in the transfer portal. And who knows, maybe a reclass too. We'll have to kind of see what happens with that over the next few weeks and however long that may take.
That thing's kind of bouncing around a little bit.
Yeah, that's been a little bit of a saga now. It seems like one day it's something, another day it's something else.
Well, it's sort of a wait to see. I mean, the indication was very strong. When you look at his situation, the indication was very strong a couple of weeks ago. It was going to happen.
Yeah,
I think it's what's desired, but again, you've got to approach your roster intelligently.
Yeah,
you don't want to overdo it in some areas, and then you complicate how you divvy up minutes.
It's not a straightforward situation in a lot of ways. Like, there's moving parts and there's things that could disrupt things. Yeah, no, and again, I get it from his perspective too, in terms of kind of maybe waiting to see what happens with the roster and maybe then decide what he wants to do. So we'll see what happens.
It's not just up to him.
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course not. Yeah. No, it definitely isn't just, Gigi Jackson situation a year ago. Not gonna be anything like that, but you talk about a guy trying to reclassify, didn't really work out. You know what I mean? So
yeah, he's not that.
No, definitely not. I'm glad you said that. I said that too, but yeah, keyword, he's definitely not that.
And this may be unpopular, but Gigi did Carolina a favor.
Yeah, agreed. And we'll leave it. AJ, we'll leave the podcast at that, because I definitely agree with you on that one. We'll go ahead and wrap this one up. Yeah. Shut the fin and get the heck out of here. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones, the other episode of the Tar Heel Illustrated podcast. If you're excited about these 3 guys coming in, if you agree with us and you think it's been a good off season so far for Carolina in the transfer portal, let's go ahead and like this video below. Let's see if we can. I want to get another 150, AJ, because we got 170 in like 12 hours on the other one. So if we can't get 150 on this one,
and most of that time was overnight, because we put it out at night. So that kind of skews it some.
Definitely. So let's see if we can run the likes up on this one as well. And again, shout out myperfectfranchise.net. Love continuing to do things with them, and big thank you to them for continuing to sponsor us. Check them out below. Check out the podcast. Go over to myperfectfranchise.net. Either give Andy a call if you're interested. I believe you can schedule an appointment on the website as well. So get in contact with him if you've been thinking about switching up your career path and you're just waiting for the right time. There's never going to be a right time. You got to jump the gun. You got to make a change, and you got to do it. Andy will be there every step of the way, and it won't cost you a dime it won't cost you a dime to pay to him unless you make some money as well. So it's just a win-win situation for everybody. So, and again, AJ, you plug the site, come join our awesome community, $8.33 a month. If you would have known what was going on behind the scenes, you would have known about Ryan's commitment before it even happened, if you were a part of our premium message boards at tarheelillustrated.com. So come sign up, links below, just $8.33 a month, and follow us on Twitter as well, because we're extremely active over there too. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next one. Appreciate you as always.
Thanks.